Sometimes a strange feeling appears. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, as if the world is not really playing on your side. You cannot always explain it. You may not even have one clear reason for it, but you feel it. You look around and it seems like things come easier to other people. Someone tries less and somehow things work out. Someone says one thing and people listen. Someone makes a small move and the door opens. And you feel like you have to push through a wall just to get to the same place. It is not always about something huge. Most of the time, it begins with small things. You try, and it does not work. You care, and people leave. You give your energy to someone, and they treat it like it was nothing. You stay honest, and someone colder gets chosen. You keep going, and still feel like you are behind. And slowly, something inside you begins to form a sentence. Maybe something is wrong with me. Or even deeper than that, maybe the world is just not on my side. And the hardest part is that this feeling is difficult to explain to anyone. Because from the outside, your life might look normal. You may still wake up. You may still answer messages. You may still smile when someone asks if you are okay. You may still do what needs to be done. But inside, there is this quiet pressure. Like you are always a little late, always a little behind, always trying to catch something that everyone else seems to have already understood. And after a while, you start looking for a reason. Why is it like this? Why do things work for others and not for me? Why does someone else seem to move through life with less resistance? Why do I keep feeling like I have to fight for things that other people receive naturally? And often, the answer that comes to mind is simple. Life is unfair. And honestly, there is truth in that. Life is not equal. People do not start from the same place. Some people grow up with more support. Some people have more safety. Some people have more confidence because someone gave it to them early. Some people have money, connections, timing, luck, or a softer place to fall. And if we are being honest, life does not promise fairness. That is hard to accept, because somewhere inside us there is an expectation. If I try, it should work. If I am good, I should be valued. If I do the right thing, life should answer in the right way. But reality does not always work like that. You can do your best and still not get the result. You can love someone honestly and still not be chosen. You can be patient for a long time and still feel like nothing is moving. You can be kind and still be hurt by people who never stop to think about what they did. And then disappointment becomes more than disappointment. It starts to feel personal. Not just this happened, but this happened to me again. Not just this was difficult, but of course it was difficult for me. Not just I failed, but this proves something about my life. And this is where the pain becomes heavier. Because you are not only seeing unfairness, you're beginning to take it personally, as if life has chosen you as a target, as if something is being done to you on purpose. And this is where the mind quietly begins to distort reality. The world may not be against you, but your experience begins to look that way. And over time, that becomes a filter. You start noticing only the things that confirm the thought. The failures stay in your memory. The rejections leave marks. The comparisons become louder. The moments when you were overlooked become proof. And everything else becomes background noise. A small good thing happens and it does not count. Someone is kind, but you do not fully believe it. Something works out, but you call it luck. Something does not work, and suddenly it feels like evidence. That is how a painful belief survives. It does not need the whole truth. It only needs enough pieces to keep repeating itself. You do not just live your life. You also explain your life to yourself. Every day, quietly, almost without noticing. And if the explanation inside you becomes, "The world is against me," then your mind will start collecting proof. And it will find proof. Because life is complicated. There are always failures. There are always delays. There are always people who disappoint you. There are always moments when something goes wrong. The question is not whether those moments exist. They do. The question is what you do with them. Do you see them as events, or do you turn them into a verdict? Because there is a difference. An event says, "This happened." A verdict says, "This always happens to me." An event can hurt. A verdict becomes a prison. And slowly, if you live inside that verdict long enough, you stop only facing difficulties. You begin expecting them. You enter a situation already bracing yourself. You meet people already waiting to be misunderstood. You try something already half convinced it will not work. And that expectation changes everything. It changes your posture. It changes your voice. It changes what you notice. It changes how quickly you give up. It changes how much you allow yourself to hope. And then a cycle begins. You think the world is against you. You become tense. You act from that tension. Maybe you become too careful. Maybe you become too defensive. Maybe you try too hard to prove yourself. Maybe you pull away before anyone can disappoint you. Then the result is not what you hoped for. And the old thought comes back. "See, I knew it." And the cycle repeats. Thought, feeling, behavior, result, confirmation. After enough time, it no longer feels like a thought. It feels like reality. And that is where it is important to stop. Not to force yourself into fake positivity. Not to say everything is fine when it is not. Not to pretend pain is wisdom but to see something honestly. A part of this reality may be created inside you. And that is not an accusation, it is not blame, it is not someone saying, "You made all your problems." No. Some things really were unfair. Some people really did not treat you well. Some doors really did close. Some periods of your life really were heavier than they should have been. But if a part of the weight is created by the way your mind keeps interpreting the world, then that also means something important. It means there is something you can work with. Not everything, but something. And sometimes something is enough to begin. Before changing anything, though, you need to understand something deeper. Why do you need the world to be fair? Where did that expectation come from? What happens inside you when it is not met? Because the most painful part is not always the event itself. It is what the event wakes up inside you. Two people can go through a similar rejection and experience it completely differently. One person thinks, "That hurt, but it is part of life." Another person thinks, "This proves I am not wanted." One person sees failure as temporary. Another person sees it as a message about who they are. And that is where the difference begins. Not always in the world, but in the way you feel yourself inside the world. There is another thing almost no one wants to admit. You compare yourself constantly. Sometimes you know you are doing it, sometimes you do not. You look at someone and think, "Why did it work for him? Why does she have that? Why am I still here? Why did they get chosen? Why does my life feel so slow?" Comparison itself is human. It is not evil. The problem is the kind of comparison we usually make. You compare someone else's visible result to your hidden inner life, and that is almost always a losing game. Because with other people, you see the surface, you see the photo, the relationship, the job title, the confidence, the result. The one moment that looks clean. But with yourself, you see everything. You see the doubt, the fear, the laziness you hate, the thoughts you would never say out loud, the nights where you almost gave up, the insecurity behind every attempt. So of course it feels like you are behind. You are comparing their edited outside to your unedited inside. And then you start measuring your worth through results. If it works, I am okay. If it does not, something is wrong with me. If they choose me, I matter. If they do not, I am nothing. And that is a dangerous connection. Result equals me. But results are unstable. Life is unstable. People are unstable. Timing is unstable. So if your identity depends on results, your sense of self will always shake. Every delay becomes an insult. Every silence becomes rejection. Every mistake becomes a character flaw. And eventually, you no longer need a real event to feel the pain. The feeling becomes a background. You wake up with it. You carry it into conversations. You hear it in things people never said. You read it into small moments. And then the world really does begin to feel hostile. Not because everything outside has changed, but because inside you are already expecting pain. There is another layer. You expect effort to guarantee a result. You give something and you expect something back. You work and you expect movement. You care and you expect care. You stay loyal and you expect loyalty. And when life does not answer in the same language, it feels unfair. And sometimes it is unfair, but the problem begins when you believe reality works like a clean transaction. I gave, so I must receive. I tried, so I must win. I waited, so it must happen. But reality is not that clean. It is made of timing, chance, other people, their fears, their limits, your environment, your history, your choices, things you control, and many things you do not. That is what makes life so difficult. You are not completely powerless, but you are not completely in control either, and this middle place is hard to live in. Because it does not give you a simple story. It does not let you say, everything is my fault. And it does not let you say, nothing depends on me. It asks for something more honest, something more adult. The world is not guaranteed to be fair, but I can still act inside it. Not because I know the outcome, not because I am promised a reward, but because my life is still mine. And before you can stand in that place, you have to ask yourself a difficult question. Am I seeing reality clearly? Or am I seeing it through the filter of my pain? Do not rush that question. Let it sit for a moment, because the answer can change the way you live. The hardest part of this whole feeling is not unfairness itself. It is that you begin to live as if unfairness is the rule. It happens quietly, not all at once. First, it is a thought. Things are not working out. Then it becomes a feeling. It is harder for me than for others. Then it becomes a background belief. This is how life is for me. And once it becomes part of your perception, you begin to confirm it without meaning to. You walk into a new situation, a job, a conversation, a chance, a relationship. And before anything happens, something inside you is already preparing for disappointment. You become guarded, or tense, or too eager, or distant. You speak in a way that is not fully you. You hide the part of yourself that actually needed to be seen. You give up a little too soon. Or you push too hard because you are afraid of being invisible. And then, when the result is not perfect, the old sentence returns. Of course, this always happens. That is how the loop closes, not because you wanted to sabotage yourself, but because pain often tries to protect you by predicting more pain. The problem is that protection can become a cage. You start avoiding anything that could hurt, places where you might fail, people who might reject you, opportunities that are not guaranteed, conversations that could expose what you really feel. At first, avoidance feels safe, but slowly, it shrinks your life. You want things to get better, but you act mainly so they will not get worse. And in that mode, growth becomes almost impossible. Because growth requires contact with uncertainty. It requires attempts that may not work. It requires being seen before you feel completely ready. It requires letting life answer without already deciding the answer for it. And this is where a small shift begins. You stop asking, how do I control the result? And you start asking, what part of this is actually mine? Not everything is yours, but some things are. Your preparation, your honesty, your boundaries, your next attempt, the way you speak to yourself after failure, the environments you keep returning to, the people you keep chasing, the stories you keep repeating, the decision to rest instead of making a final conclusion from exhaustion. These are not small things. They are quiet forms of power. While you judge life only by outcomes, life will often feel unfair. Because outcomes are made of many factors. But when you return to action, a different feeling appears. Not control, influence. And influence is enough to keep a person alive inside their own life. You also have to notice how quickly your mind generalizes. One thing happens and the mind says, always. One rejection and it says, no one chooses me. One mistake and it says, I ruin everything. One hard season and it says, life is against me. That word always is dangerous. So is never. They turn a painful moment into a whole identity. They make the picture heavier than it really is. They make today speak for your entire future. And most of the time, today does not know enough to do that. A thought comes, I will not make it. And you believe it, not because it has proof, but because it sounds familiar. A thought comes, nothing ever works out for me. And you do not question it. You treat it like reality. But a thought is not reality. A thought is a version. Sometimes it is useful, sometimes it is afraid. Sometimes it is old pain speaking in the present tense. And when you start seeing that, space appears. A small space between the thought and your next action. That space may not feel impressive, but it matters. In that space, you can ask, is this true? Or is this just familiar? Am I responding to what happened, or to every time something like this hurt me before? Am I protecting myself, or am I abandoning myself again? You do not have to answer perfectly. Just noticing the question is already a beginning. Because not everything you feel is a fact. Not everything you think is a prophecy. And not everything that happens is aimed at you. Life may still be hard, but it stops being a personal attack. And that changes something. Maybe not all at once, but enough. Chapter 1. Stop taking every difficulty personally. When something goes wrong, pain almost always tries to explain it through you. It did not work, so I am not good enough. They did not answer, so I do not matter. They did not choose me, so I must be impossible to choose. But that is not a fact. That is the reaction of an exhausted inner world. The world is often chaotic. People act from their own fears, habits, tiredness, wounds, and limits. Events come together through timing, chance, context, and decisions that were never in your hands. And if every painful thing becomes personal, you will live in constant defense. You will walk through life like every silence is a message. Every delay is a sign. Every failure is a verdict. And that will exhaust you more than the event itself. Try, at least sometimes, to separate the event from the sentence you attach to it. The event may be painful, but the sentence is often born inside you. They did not reply. That is an event. I am not important to anyone. That is a sentence. The project failed. That is an event. I never succeed at anything. That is a sentence. Someone left. That is an event. Everyone leaves me. That is a sentence. When you learn to notice the difference, a small space opens, and in that space, you do not have to choose the old wound immediately. You can choose a more honest view, not a soft lie, not fake optimism, just something closer to the truth. This hurt, but it does not get to define me. Chapter 2. Facts and conclusions are not the same thing. One of the main reasons life begins to feel hostile is that we confuse facts with conclusions. A fact is usually simple. They said no. I made a mistake. The plan did not work. The message did not come. But the conclusion can become enormous. They said no, so I will never be chosen. I made a mistake, so I ruin everything. The plan failed, so my life is stuck. The message did not come, so I am easy to forget. A fact is what happened. A conclusion is the meaning you gave to what happened. And very often, the conclusion is what makes the pain unbearable. Not the mistake. The idea that the mistake proves you are useless. Not the silence. The idea that the silence proves you are not worth answering. Not the rejection. The idea that rejection tells the whole truth about you. So when pain rises, ask yourself gently, what exactly happened? What did I feel? What conclusion did I make? Is there another possible conclusion? This is not about lying to yourself. It is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about refusing to give your entire life to one interpretation. Sometimes the truth is smaller than your fear says it is. Sometimes the event is painful, but not total. Sometimes the mind is trying to protect you by making a final judgment too early. And you can say, I see the conclusion, but I do not have to worship it. Chapter 3. The expectation of fairness can become a trap. Inside, most of us lives a very human expectation. If I try, it should work. If I am good, I should be valued. If I am honest, people should treat me honestly. If I give love, love should come back. But reality does not always answer through that logic. Good people can be overlooked. Hard-working people can wait years for results. Kind people can be used by people who know how to take. Honest people can be hurt by those who never planned to be honest back. It is painful to admit this, because a part of us wants the world to have a moral balance, a hidden justice, a clean equation. But life is not always clean, and if you expect the world to reward you for your purity, every wound will feel like betrayal. Your values cannot be a business deal with life. You do not stay honest only because honesty guarantees a prize. You stay honest because you do not want to lose yourself. You do not stay kind because everyone deserves access to you. You stay kind because bitterness would cost too much of your soul. You do not keep going because success is promised. You keep going because stopping completely would slowly turn you into someone you do not recognize. When values stop being a transaction, unfairness loses some of its power over you. It may still hurt, but it does not steal your center. Chapter 4. Exhaustion often disguises itself as philosophy. Sometimes the thought, the world is against me, does not come from deep wisdom. Sometimes it comes from exhaustion. When a person lives under pressure for too long, their perception gets darker. A small delay feels like a sign. A normal rejection feels like the end. A difficult day feels like destiny. A tired mind can turn everything into evidence. Exhaustion says, nothing matters. But sometimes what it really means is, I cannot keep living like this. Exhaustion says, nothing will work. But often it is not asking for a conclusion. It is asking for recovery, sleep, food, silence, a clean room, a walk without music, one day without comparing yourself to everyone, one evening where you do not punish yourself for being tired. Before you make final conclusions about life, sometimes you need to return to basic stability. Because a tired mind does not always see reality. It sees reality through smoke. And maybe today you do not need a new philosophy. Maybe you need water. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need to stop arguing with your whole existence at 2 in the morning. Not every dark thought is profound. Sometimes it is just a tired nervous system trying to speak. Chapter 5. You can be not powerless, even if you do not control everything. One of the hardest truths in life is this: you do not control everything. But you are not completely powerless either. Between those two extremes is the adult position. Not total control, not victimhood, participation. You cannot force people to choose you, but you can stop humiliating yourself in front of those who do not. You cannot guarantee a result, but you can improve the action. You cannot erase the past, but you can stop living as if it is still happening every day. You cannot control every opinion, but you can choose whose opinion gets access to your inner life. You cannot make life fair, but you can decide not to become unfair to yourself. When you bring your attention back to what actually depends on you, a quiet strength appears. Not heroic, not loud, not the kind of strength people post about, but real. The strength to take the next step without a guarantee. The strength to try again without calling yourself stupid. The strength to leave a place that keeps breaking you. The strength to rest before you destroy yourself in the name of discipline. This strength is not dramatic, but it is the kind that changes a life slowly. Chapter 6. Comparison turns someone else's life into a weapon against you. You see someone else's result and compare it to your inner state. They have the picture. You have the backstage. They have the announcement. You have the doubt. They have the smile. You have the fear, the fatigue, the unfinished parts, the private failures. That comparison is not fair. When you look at someone else's success, it can seem like it came more easily. Maybe sometimes it did. Some people do have better timing. Some people do have more support. Some people do get doors opened for them. But even then, their life is not evidence against yours. You do not see the whole cost. You do not see every loss. You do not see what they are afraid of. You do not see what they envy in someone else. You see a fragment and turn it into a judgment about your entire life. That is how comparison becomes cruel. It does not just show you what someone else has. It tells you that you are late, that you are behind, that you are less. But someone else's life is not proof of your failure. It can be a mirror. What do I want? What woke up in me when I saw that? Where have I stopped looking at my own hunger? But it should not become a knife you use against your own worth every day. Admire, learn, notice, but do not bleed for every life that is not yours. Chapter 7. Envy can be a compass, not a poison. People often shame envy, and yes, envy can become poisonous. It can make you bitter. It can make you minimize other people. It can make you hate yourself for not being where they are. But envy is not always evil. Sometimes envy is pain showing you the direction of your hunger. You envy freedom because you want to breathe. You envy love because you are tired of emotional coldness. You envy confidence because you have spent years apologizing for your own presence. You envy someone's result because you have been waiting for your own for a long time. If you do not understand envy, it becomes poison. You start attacking others in your head, or you start attacking yourself. But if you look at it more honestly, it can become a question. What exactly am I missing? What have I been postponing? Where am I not living? What desire have I called unrealistic because I was afraid to try? Do not turn someone else's victory into proof of your defeat. Use it as a signal, not to copy their path, not to become them, but to see your own path more clearly. Envy becomes dangerous when it has nowhere honest to go. Give it a direction. Let it show you what still matters. Chapter 8. You may be knocking on the wrong door. Sometimes it feels like all of life is closed. But maybe only one door is closed. One person did not see you. One environment did not accept you. One plan did not work. One version of you did not fit one place. Pain generalizes and says, "There is no place for me anywhere." But the world is bigger than your current circle, bigger than one job, bigger than one city, bigger than one relationship, bigger than one group of people who did not know how to value you, bigger than one version of yourself that failed before. Sometimes, the answer is not to hit the same door harder. Sometimes the answer is to step back and notice that there are other entrances. If you were unseen for a long time in one place, you can begin to believe you are impossible to see. But sometimes the problem is not your invisibility. Sometimes the problem is the eyes that were looking. Not everyone has the ability to recognize you. Not every room deserves your full self. Not every closed door is a divine message. Sometimes it is just a closed door, and you are allowed to stop bleeding on it. Chapter 9. Life does not always answer quickly. We are used to wanting fast confirmation. I acted, so I should see a result. I changed, so life should change immediately. I tried, so something should move. But many important things grow slowly, and for a long time, growth can look invisible. A seed under the ground does not look like a tree. The person changing inside may still doubt, still fall back, still envy, still get tired, still have old thoughts. But something may already be moving underneath. Sometimes progress is not a dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes progress is that you fall less deeply than before. You recover a little faster. You notice the old thought sooner. You do not believe it completely. You take one step instead of disappearing for a month. you pause before destroying yourself with the same old words. Do not dismiss slow change. Slow does not mean fake. Quiet does not mean meaningless. Invisible does not mean absent. Some parts of your life are growing in a way you cannot yet show anyone. Keep that in mind before you call yourself stuck. Sometimes you are not stuck. Sometimes you are forming roots. Chapter 10. Fear is not always a stop sign. You may be waiting for the moment when you stop being afraid. And if you wait for that, you may never begin. Because confidence often does not come before action. It comes after small evidence. First a step, then experience, then a little trust, then the feeling, maybe I can. Fear does not always mean you should stop. Sometimes it only means you are entering something unfamiliar. Fear can walk beside you without holding the steering wheel. You can be afraid and still speak. Afraid and still try. Afraid and still leave what is destroying you. Afraid and still send the message. Afraid and still start again. This is not the beautiful confidence people imagine. This is real maturity, not the absence of fear. The ability to move without letting fear become your whole identity. There will be moments when your body feels behind your decision. Your hands may shake. Your voice may not sound perfect. Your mind may look for a way out. But you can still take the step. And after enough steps, fear learns something too. It learns that it does not always have to protect you by stopping you. Chapter 11. Do not turn your pain into your identity. Yes, unfair things may have happened to you. Yes, you may not have received the support you needed. Yes, you may have had to go through things that others did not see. Yes, your path may have been heavier than it should have been. That should be acknowledged, not minimized, not covered with positive words, not turned into a lesson too quickly. But there is also a danger. The danger is turning pain into a name. I am the one who is never lucky. I am the one people do not choose. I am the one who always has it harder. I am the one life ignores. When pain becomes your self-image, the past begins to control the future. You stop asking what is possible. You start asking how the old story will repeat this time. Respect your pain, but do not build a home inside it. Admit that you were hurt, but do not make the wound your essence. You are more than what happened to you. You are more than the version of you that had to survive it. Survival may have shaped you, but it does not have to be the only language you speak forever. Chapter 12. Sometimes you are the one against yourself. Sometimes the world feels hostile because there has been a hostile voice inside you for a long time. You make a mistake and you hear, "You always ruin everything." You get tired and you hear, "You are weak." You want support and you hear, "Stop being pathetic." You need time and you hear, "You are falling behind." If that inner judge lives inside you, even a neutral world will feel cold. Wherever you go, you carry someone who is always against you. And it is exhausting to live like that. Being on your own side does not mean excusing everything. It does not mean pretending you never make mistakes. It does not mean becoming blind to your own patterns. It means speaking to yourself honestly without humiliation, correcting yourself without destroying yourself, growing through respect, not contempt. There is a difference between accountability and self-hatred. Accountability says, "I made a mistake. I need to repair what I can." Self-hatred says, "I am the mistake." One can help you change. The other keeps you trapped. You do not become better by treating yourself like an enemy. You become better when you can finally stay with yourself long enough to change. Chapter 13. Old loneliness can speak with the voice of the present. Sometimes a rejection today touches more than today's self. It wakes up old places, the places where you were not heard, not protected, not chosen, not comforted, left alone with feelings that were too big for you at the time. And then a small situation creates a large reaction. Someone does not answer, and it is not just silence now. It becomes the old feeling, "I am alone again." Someone seems distant, and it is not just distance now. It becomes the old fear, "I am about to be abandoned." Something goes wrong, and it is not just a problem now. It becomes the old belief, "There is no one here for me." You are not necessarily being dramatic. Maybe your reaction is bigger than the event because the event is carrying a lot of history. Those feelings cannot be treated harshly. They need something calmer. You can say to yourself, "I see you. You are scared. This feels familiar. But we have more choice now. We do not have to abandon ourselves in the dark again." That kind of inner response may feel strange at first, but sometimes healing begins when you stop shaming the part of you that still hurts. Chapter 14. Make the sentence smaller to get your strength back. The sentence, "The world is against me," is too large. If the whole world is against you, there is nowhere to stand. Every day becomes a battlefield. Every person becomes a threat. Every mistake becomes proof of war. So try making the sentence smaller. Not, "The world is against me," but, "I'm hurt right now." Not, "Everything always goes wrong," but, "This situation did not go the way I hoped." Not, "Life is unfair to me," but, "I faced something unfair, and now I need to understand my next step." Not, "No one cares," but, "I needed care from someone and did not receive it." When you make the sentence smaller, the pain does not magically disappear, but it becomes more workable. You cannot have a conversation with the whole world. You can have a conversation with a specific situation. You cannot solve forever. You can respond to today. You cannot fix your whole identity in one night. You can stop using one sentence to crush yourself. Sometimes strength returns not because life becomes easier, but because the problem becomes specific again, and specific things can be faced. Chapter 15. Create small places that are on your side. You cannot make the whole world gentle, but you can create small places in your life where you are not at war. A morning ritual, a clean desk, a quiet walk, one honest conversation, a room that does not feel like chaos, a playlist that helps you breathe, a person after whom you do not feel smaller, a night where you do not scroll until your mind turns against you. These may seem like small things, but a human being cannot live only in resistance. You need shelter, not as escape, as recovery. Sometimes the feeling that life might be on your side begins with one simple decision. I will stop making my own life harder every day. I will not begin the morning by comparing myself. I will not end the night by insulting myself. I will not keep returning to places that break me and call it loyalty. I will not give everyone equal access to my nervous system. Small areas of peace are not weakness. They are where strength returns. You may not be able to fix everything right now, but you can make one corner of your life less cruel. And sometimes that is where a person begins again. Chapter 16. Not everything must be endured. Some things must be changed. There is pain you have to move through, and there is pain that tells you the path needs to change. Not every difficulty is a sign to stop, but not every resistance is a sign to keep suffering either. Wisdom is not the slogan, "Never give up." Wisdom asks better questions. What here requires discipline, and what requires letting go? Where am I growing, and where am I only repeating the same pain while waiting for a different ending? What is hard because it matters, and what is hard because it is dead? Continuing can mean different things. Sometimes continuing means taking another step. Sometimes it means changing the method. Sometimes it means leaving the dead end and saving your energy for a living road. You are allowed to admit that something is no longer working. You are allowed to stop confusing loyalty with self-abandonment. You are allowed to change direction without calling yourself weak. There are dreams that require patience, and there are situations that use your patience to keep you trapped. Learn the difference. Your life is not proof of strength just because you can endure pain. Sometimes strength is deciding that endurance is no longer the right answer. Chapter 17. Do not close yourself off from life completely. When it hurts, you may want to become hard. trust no one, expect nothing, hope for nothing, need nothing, dream of nothing. At first, that can feel like protection, but often it becomes another prison. You cannot close yourself only to pain. If you close your heart completely, joy stops entering too. So does closeness, so does surprise, so does tenderness, so does possibility. The world becomes empty, not always because it is empty, but because you have closed the windows. Maturity is not naive openness. It is also not dead numbness. Maturity is discernment. Do not open to everyone. Do not trust too quickly. Do not give your deepest self to people who have shown no care. But do not turn old pain into a lifetime ban on the future. Some people will not be safe. Some will be. Some doors will close. Some will open. Some attempts will fail. Some will become the beginning of a life you could not imagine from where you were standing. Do not let what hurt you become the only thing that gets to define what is possible. You can protect yourself without disappearing. You can be careful without becoming unreachable. Chapter 18. 3 questions for every day. When everything feels hostile, return to 3 simple questions. First, what today is not under my control? Second, what today is under my control? Third, what is one small step I can take without trying to be a hero? Not under my control. Someone else's opinion. Under my control. How much authority I give it inside me. Not under my control. The past. Under my control. Whether I keep living as if it is still happening. Not under my control. The final result. Under my control. My action, preparation, honesty, rest, and next attempt. These questions will not make life perfect. They will not remove uncertainty. They will not make every wound disappear. But they will give you a point of contact with your own life. You do not control everything, but you are not nothing. Between those 2 truths, freedom begins. Not freedom as a dramatic feeling, freedom as a small return to yourself. 1 decision, 1 boundary, 1 honest action, 1 refusal to let the darkest thought become the boss of the whole day. That is enough for today. And sometimes, today is the only place where real change can begin. Chapter 19. Do not make final conclusions from a temporary state. When you are inside a heavy period, it feels endless. If it hurts now, it feels like it will hurt forever. If you feel empty now, emptiness feels permanent. If things are not working now, it feels like nothing will ever work. But your current state does not know your whole future. It does not know every person you will meet. It does not know every door you have not tried. It does not know every version of you that has not yet appeared. It does not know what clarity may come after rest. It does not know what will change when you stop choosing the same pain. Do not take night thoughts as morning truth. Do not mistake exhaustion for destiny. Do not turn one season into your whole life. A hard period can feel convincing because you are inside it. But being inside a storm does not mean the whole world is only storm. Sometimes the most important thing is not to solve your life in that moment. It is simply to refuse to make a permanent decision from temporary darkness. You can say, "I do not know what happens next, but I will not let this state define all of me." That sentence may be small, but it can keep a person from disappearing into a bad night. Chapter 20. Sobriety between naivety and despair. There are two extremes. The first is believing that if you are good and try hard, the world will always be gentle. The second is deciding that everything is meaningless and nothing can change. Both extremes simplify reality. The first breaks when life disappoints you. The second kills movement before life even has a chance to answer. Between them is sobriety. Sobriety says, life can be unfair, and I can still act. Not everything depends on me, but something does. Some people may have it easier, but my path is not meaningless because it is not theirs. Some efforts may not be rewarded quickly, but that does not mean effort is empty. Some people may not value me, but that does not mean I have no value. Sobriety does not promise ease. It does not decorate reality. It does not say, everything happens for a reason when you are not ready to hear that. It simply gives you back adult freedom. The freedom to live not because the world is perfect, but because your life is still yours. That is quieter than hope, but sometimes it is stronger. Chapter 21. When it gets heavy again. Even after understanding all of this, there will be days when it feels like everything is against you again. Someone will not answer. Something will fall apart. Someone else's success will sting. Your effort will not bring the result you wanted. An old fear will return, and the old thought will rise again. Do not think that means you are back at the beginning. It means you are human. Old filters do not disappear in one evening. They weaken when, again and again, you stop giving them full power. If the thought came, but you noticed it, that is already a step. If pain rose, but you did not turn it into a life sentence, that is already a step. If you were tired and did not call yourself weak, that is already a step. If you compared yourself and then came back to your own path, that is already a step. Healing often looks too ordinary to recognize. It looks like catching yourself 1 second earlier, speaking to yourself 1 degree softer, choosing not to send the desperate message, choosing not to return to the place that keeps proving your worst belief, choosing sleep over another hour of self-punishment. These things do not look dramatic, but they are how a life changes, not all at once, repeatedly, quietly, honestly. Chapter 22. The final return to yourself. Maybe the world is not against you. Maybe it is simply not built the way you hoped it would be. It is not always fair, not always soft, not always clear, not always quick to respond to effort, not always kind to people who are trying hard to stay kind. But that does not mean you have to surrender. It does not mean you have to hate the world. And it definitely does not mean you have to hate yourself. You can admit, this was hard for me, and that can be enough. Your pain is real. Your exhaustion is real. Your disappointment is real. But none of it is a final verdict. It is part of the path, not the whole map. You can stop trying to prove that the entire world is against you, just to have permission to say you are hurt. You are allowed to be hurt without turning life into an enemy. You are allowed to be tired without becoming your tiredness. You are allowed to have questions without deciding that there is no answer anywhere. Maybe your first act of strength is not changing everything. Maybe it is simply refusing to stand against yourself today. Not forever. Today. One step, then another. Slowly, without violence toward yourself, without demanding that you become a completely new person overnight. You can move with fear, with doubt, with exhaustion, with questions, and still move. And maybe one day you will notice something. The world did not become perfect, but you stand differently inside it. Not as someone waiting for a hit from every direction, but as someone who knows hits happen, rejections happen, unfairness happens, but none of that has to become my name. There is a place for me, even if I am still looking for it. There is a path for me, even if it does not look like someone else's. There is a reason to move, even if life gives no guarantees. And maybe the most important thing is not proving that the world is on your side. Maybe the most important thing is finally becoming on your own side. Because when you become on your own side, the world stops being absolute darkness. There is still chaos. There is still pain. There are still people who will not understand. There are still doors that will close, But now, there is also you. Not as your own enemy, not as the permanent accused, not as someone who has to prove the right to exist every day, but as a living person, tired but still here, doubting but still moving, hurt but not erased. And that matters more than you may be able to feel right now. Conclusion. The world does not have to be against you. If we bring everything back to one quiet thought, it might be this: you do not need to prove that the world is against you in order to admit that you have been hurt. It was hard for you, that is true. You may have moved through resistance, that is true. You may not have received what you thought you deserved, that is true. You may have looked at others and felt that life was easier for them. That may also be true. But it does not mean your whole life is a conspiracy against you. It does not mean you are broken. It does not mean there is no path for you. Sometimes the path does not begin with confidence. It begins with refusing to make the darkest conclusion the final truth. Sometimes strength does not begin with inspiration. It begins with one small sentence. I do not know how everything will turn out, but I will not become my own enemy right now. And that is enough for the first step, not for the whole life, for one step, then another and another. Slowly, without loud promises, without forcing yourself to heal on command, without pretending the past did not matter, without turning pain into an identity. You can go with fear, with doubt, with tiredness, with questions that do not yet have answers. But you can still go. And maybe one day you will look back and notice that the world did not become easy, but you stopped standing inside it like someone who was already defeated. You stopped reading every silence as a sentence. You stopped turning every delay into proof that life had rejected you. You stopped giving your worst thought the right to name your whole existence. And that is not small. That is the beginning of a different life. Not a perfect life, not a life without pain, but a life where pain is no longer the only narrator. A life where you can say, I was hurt, but I am still here. I was tired, but I am not only tired. I was disappointed, but I am not finished. I was not always chosen, but I can stop abandoning myself. I did not control everything, but I still have a part to play. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is where the world begins to feel less like an enemy. Not because it suddenly becomes fair, but because you stop leaving yourself alone inside it. You return to yourself, quietly, again and again. And every time you return, the darkness loses a little authority. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to take the next step. Enough to live one more day without turning your pain into a verdict. Enough to remember that you are not a mistake that life keeps making. You are a person. A tired person, maybe. A wounded person, maybe. A person who still has questions. But a person. And that means your story is not over just because one chapter was heavy. The world does not have to be against you, and you do not have to be against yourself. That might be the first real peace.